It's 5:30 p.m. and I will call to order the MISD Board of Trustees meeting for January 9th, 2017. Thank everyone for coming. If you would please join me in a moment of silence, then followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Agenda item number 2. Any presentations, recognitions, awards, or announcements this meeting? Hearing none, we'll move to public forum, and we do have someone who has signed up to address the board this evening. His name is David Bryant Perkins. He's representing his dissertation study, topic online language study and chess in schools. Mr. Perkins, if you please come on up. It is not an agenda item, so we can't engage in a discussion with you, but we can certainly hear what you have to say.
Certainly, I understand that, and I thank you all for the time to introduce myself and my idea. I'm in Midland to accomplish two goals. One, of course, is to conduct my dissertation study, which I'm going to describe briefly, as well as to lay the groundwork to turn my screenplay on Doug Russell into a film. Doug was my coach in college, and I ended up writing screenplays, so I wrote one on him. I'm a retired teacher. I taught all over the world and lectured, primarily Germany in the 80s.
Mr. Perkins, if you could please maybe speak a little closer to the microphone so we could hear you better.
Okay.
I'm sorry about the acoustics there, but thank you.
I'll just lean in. My dissertation is an online language learning program that will allow any school to offer up to 8 languages. This program is simply using existing technology, such for online assignments, dictionaries, practices. What makes it revolutionary is that your teacher's in the language, is in the country of the language that you'll be learning. So in other words, if you want to learn Japanese, you can Skype your teacher in Japan. Everything else would be online. It's economically feasible because people in China simply want to Skype an English teacher from our end for a couple of hours a week. My program would accommodate any number, so if there's only 5 or 6 kids in a school that would want to take Japanese or something, there's really no extra cost because I know it's economically unfeasible to hire a Japanese teacher or any other foreign language for just a few students. You have I guess, a paper. It has something like this on it. That's basically the outline of the program.
We have received that.
The only thing that's missing is my dissertation, which is how to solve the problem of conversational practice, which is what my study will address, and it should be finished by this summer. As long as I'm in town doing those things, there is one program that I've already created that I think might be beneficial to the school, and this would be offering chess online to anybody on any grade level, elementary, middle school, or high school that would want to play. By the way, there are several colleges now that give scholarships for chess, among them Connecticut, Maryland, North Carolina, Tennessee, University of Dallas, and Texas Tech. So that would be an academic thing that they could, within a year, get involved in the competitions that they have here in Texas as far as having a state champion and even to, like I said, get a scholarship. Is there any questions at this point? I pretty much gave briefly on there. Those are things that I would like to offer. If you guys are in agreement to that, I mean, I'm not kidding when I say this, I could have this in the schools by next week.
We are only allowed to ask you questions, but I do have a question. Now, tell me about your presence in Midland. What brings you to Midland? Are you living here? Are you visiting just to make this presentation, or what?
No, I plan to live here. I will do my study. There is a school that agreed to work with me. I can't go any further than that because even in my dissertation, as a privacy to the school and to everybody else, all I can say is that it was done at a high school in the Odessa, Midland region, or the Permian Basin is basically the way that I'm going to describe it. I will be here for that. I've already written a screenplay. By the way, it's won several awards. Thank you.
Were you at the Golden Globes last night?
I did watch that, but this is basically Forrest Gump and American Graffiti, if you can imagine. In fact, you can read the script if you go on my website, go under screenplays, the first one listed. If you go under awards, you can actually read the entire script. I actually came here during the summer, was interviewing people that lived here, and that's sort of what it came to be involved with. And I have to say this from the bottom of my heart, I'm so impressed with this town learning about some of the traditions and stuff that you have. For example, there's a scene that I put in there after hearing people about it, about how people pull over when the funeral's going in respect. And I heard this on so many other areas, that the football players would take a knee and that people would stop on the road. And these are the kind of things that I thought were, that show Midland in a positive way, to put that in the screenplay, to have that thing going on so that people can see it. So I invite you all to read it. Like I said, I'm here to try to pull the things together to actually make it a film. I understand that a COM having a 50-year anniversary, it'd be really cool to have it for that when Doug comes out. But if not, that's something that's on the books that I'm working on. By the way, that would be another thing that I would offer online, is how to write a screenplay. Believe it or not, I was a special ed teacher, and all of my kids passed their writing proficiency exams in Nevada using that formula, because basically when you're writing a screenplay, you only put down what do you see and what do you hear. And believe it or not, that's exactly how kids talk in a cafeteria. Well, Bill's going to walk over and he said, I'm going to do this. And then he walked. If you teach the kids to write how they talk naturally anyway, it becomes more of an asset of a toolbox that they can reach when they're doing their writing exam, rather than trying to memorize all these things that they've been taught. So that's another element that I could certainly interject in there. I've actually was offered a class for Midland College on just their continuing education on how to write a screenplay, and it was very successful.
Any other questions? All right, Ms. Perkins, thank you for the information. Appreciate your interest. I have a Boy Scout. Would you please stand and be recognized? Would you please introduce yourself, your troop, and why you're here this evening, please? Great. All right, well, thank you very much. Welcome. All right, moving on to agenda item number 4, public hearing, District Texas Academic Performance Report. Do I call it to order at this time? It is now, use my Apple time. It is 5:38 p.m. and I will call to order the public hearing on District Texas Academic Performance Report. Anyone would like to address the board? The information is available online, as it is every year. All right, we'll conclude the hearing at 5:39 p.m. And agenda item number 5, district reports. Ms. Kale, the AF rating model. Information begins on 96 of our board packet.
First thing I'd like to do, board, is let you see the A to F overview video, very short video from TEA.
Thanks for tuning in to learn more about current progress on Texas's proposed A through F school accountability model. The Texas legislature mandated that all schools be rated on one of 5 different levels: A, B, C, D, or F. Much like students get grades in several subjects and then an overall GPA, each school will be given A through F grades based on 5 different areas of performance, what we call domains, and then an overall grade. The tentative proposal has the grades working as follows. Schools will be graded in the first domain based on student achievement, which we think of as how many kids pass. Schools are also graded on student progress, which we think of as how much better students get year over year. For the overall grade, we'll first choose the better rating of student achievement or student progress. That is then combined with how well the school does relative to its level of student poverty, how well the school does preparing students for college, career, or the military, and finally how the school district evaluates its own school's performance. The combination of these 5 individual domains will become the campus's overall A through F grade. In preparing the proposed design for the new A through F accountability model, we wanted to adhere to two philosophical commitments. First, we do not want the allocation of grades to be a forced distribution, meaning that there shouldn't be a guaranteed percentage of Fs or As. It should be mathematically possible for every campus in the state of Texas to get an A. Second, we want some degree of stability in the model, rather than having goalposts that constantly change. This means that an A in year 1 should be the same as an A in year 5, so parents and teachers can make good apples-to-apples comparisons over time regarding how well we are improving our support for students. This process is all ongoing. These ratings don't take effect until August of 2018. 18 months before that, in January 2017, a draft release of a proposed approach will be given to the legislature for further review during the legislative session. We will continue to gather input from parents, teachers, and others over the next year until the transition to the new A through F accountability system is finalized. For more detailed information on how grades are calculated for each domain, please visit the TEA website.
Basically, some points that I want to make about the A through F system in conjunction with the rest of the district executive staff is A to F is a preliminary report designed for the legislature. And the information within the report is simply a different way of looking at information that we've already been provided in August. Due to the complex nature of all the calculations within the report, we will not be going down to that depth with the principals because we want them to focus on student learning and the pathways to improving student achievement that we've already established this year. If you will remember, when I presented the A through F in December, I said there were 3 things that we needed to make sure that we did even when these ratings came out. Number 1, we needed to focus on student progress. We needed to focus on students at the campus level, making sure that we know who they are. And we needed to focus on quality teaching and assessment in every single classroom. Now, one takeaway that we can have from the A through F ratings as a district is that we know we're still not meeting the needs of our most at-risk students. That's evidenced by Domain 3, which was also indicated in August 2016 with Index 3. We need to ensure that our district staff, our principals, our teachers, and our community understand that every single child that we have in our district has the capability to learn and to learn to the highest levels of achievement that they can attain. And that's the important thing that we want to emphasize. Just so that you have some talking points, one thing that Rod wanted me to point out is that Domain 2, student progress, this is the way they calculated Domain 2 is they simply used Index 2 results, and they plugged that number in. For Index 2, compared to Domain 2, we had 17 campuses that met standard in Index 2. However, we had, of those 17 campuses that met standard, they all got a D or an F in Domain 2, just so that you can see a little bit of comparability between the two systems. Another thing I'd like for you to do is look at the handout that you have that has the diagram on it. And if you will look at the diagram at the bottom, I want to note to you that you can see from that without even having to see the numbers, because I know the numbers are small, and Leah has some larger copies if you need them. But what's not important is the numbers, but if you can see there is essentially a bell curve. These are the results for each of the domains for every single district in the state of Texas. So you can see that this preliminary report was built upon a bell curve. A little bit of a slight dip in Domain 3 with the bell curve, but other than that, it's pretty much a bell curve. Now, when you have a bell curve with an A through F system, C comes in the middle. How many of you are accepting of a C for your child? Any parent? We're not. We're usually happy if they have an A or a B. So that's just kind of gives a parallel view there. I would like, also on there are just some statistics that I've created doing some data analysis with the results. And if you'll look at the last paragraph pretty much, of 48 districts, which is 4% of all districts in the state, with EcoDis populations ranging from 40 to 50% and 7 to 17% ELL, which equates to about a 10% variance of what we have within MISD. One district received an A. 4 districts received an A in Domain 2, only one of those districts being comparable in size to us. 2 districts received A's in Domain 3, none comparable to us in size. 4 districts received A's in Domain 4, none comparable in size to us. So just some little things to provide you some talking points throughout the community. Additionally, I'd like to give public thanks to 2 of our MISD parents, one being Christine Foreman, who is here, and then Sandra Torres, because they made a parent perspective video. Sandra made a video today. I don't know, is Sandra here? No. Sandra made the same video that Christine made, but she made it in Spanish for our Spanish-speaking population, and we'll try to make that live within the next couple of days. But we want to appreciate what she did, most definitely, and I can tell you, just from posting it on our accountability Facebook page, we've had over 10,000 views and over 90 shares with the video that Christine made. So I'd like to publicly thank her. Additionally attached to your document are the caveats. You know, that was over a 500-page document from TEA that they released on Friday, and I know you all read it over the weekend. But I wanted to point out the caveats, especially the yellow highlights, is that no inferences about district or campus performance in the 15-16 school year should be made from these ratings. And they should not in any way be considered a predictor for future performance. And then the domain 1 through 4 targets used to determine A through F ratings in this report are based on rating cut points determined by the commissioner for purposes of demonstrating one possible, but not necessarily the final approach. And then this report does not include data for all indicators planned for 17-18. So that's exactly how we need to use this report as a tool for us to have another set of eyes looking at our data and how it's interpreted and moving forward, but certainly not to lose the focus of what we're doing in the classrooms and the progress that we're making at this point. Do you have any questions? Yes, sir. The commissioner determines the rating cut points. I'm sorry?
As far as process.
That's a very good question. I'm sorry, I do not know the answer to that. We have received very limited information on the methodology for this because it's going to completely change. All we have is the actual cut points. I can tell you the majority of the cut points look like bell curves.
Well, what I'm concerned about is the damage that's being done as we speak in all of these districts, especially when it comes to the image that these young people and their parents create as a result of this kind of accountability process. It doesn't help their ego.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Are they going to tell us prior to the start of 17, 18, what the final parameters will be, or do we even know?
Probably not prior to 17, 18. Typically, it's in the spring of the accountability year when we get the information about how accountability is going to be rated. So spring 2018 would be more likely.
We'll get, and as I understand it, we'll get our letter grades that are supposed to be indicative of accountability performance, if you will, in August of 2018. And it'll be a reflection of the 17-18 school year, correct?
That is correct, and the index system will disappear.
And we won't know at the beginning of the 17-18 school year what all the exact criteria will be that we will be judged for that year. We will learn that in the spring, perhaps, of 18.
Yes, sir.
That's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
How's the reaction been from the community? I mean, have you had any other, what's the overall consensus that you feel that here in Midland that,
I'm not sure I can really
Or the
answer that.
attitude.
All I've heard is on what's on social media, really, and that's always a little one-sided. I can tell you from teachers and from parents and community members that have educated themselves about this, that they see that there's a lot of fallacies within this system and that it needs to be improved. And those comments are more statewide than within Midland.
well, the people I've spoken with, you know, the initial reaction they get is, you know, they just appalled at the fact that your child could be going or classified as an F school. And so the system, the fallacy in the system is that fact that each individual child and each individual parent are individuals from the rest of the students population, so are the teachers and staff. And this classifies everybody at one school with one grade. And so my hope is that the outcry will continue because it's a real unfair and unjust system, especially for children that are being labeled. You
Well,
know.
yes, we all have strengths and weaknesses, and if someone graded me on my mathematical skills, I would be very distraught.
Yes.
So I think that's one way that we can look at it. One way that Rod has talked with us about it is that the overall grade in and of itself is not necessarily going to be the way to handle it. I think an accountability system is needed, and I think the way that they're looking at it right now is a potentially good way to do it. It just needs lots of refinement. And I think the way it's set out right now, I think it overemphasized negative grading upon campuses where economically disadvantaged students and kids of poverty are residing, which is not good.
Right. And that's the first thing I saw in the comments from the Houston paper, the Dallas paper, the Austin paper, is the fact that it automatically just shows up, same data that exists today. It's basically not targeting, but it's just identifying in a stringent way where there's more need in the system. So it's not helping to identify that. But you know, one of the reasons that one of the reasons that has to be talked about, and you have to say it publicly, is because sometimes it's not. Sometimes we hold back on saying things because we think that everybody thinks or is thinking the same line in the same line that we are, but in actuality, sometimes it's good to put the news out because the whole community needs to get involved in especially in this situation here. Because in the future, when it comes to bear, then it'll be a real outcry. So, thank you.
Based on what we are currently doing to improve our academic performance, is what we are doing above and beyond what this accountability system supposedly requires of us?
Would you like to answer that, Rod?
Huh?
I'm going to let Rod answer that.
Well, the way all of the accountability system that we have right here, 3 of the domains are built on the STAR test. The results come from those tests. And so the question is, are we improving instruction in the classroom? And yes, we're on the right track to improve instruction in the classroom. That's what our focus has been, both on beliefs and behaviors. That's where PLC is so important to us, because the instructional process will end up improving the results from the classroom. Now, the fourth domain is graduation and prepared for success, after high school with a number of measures there. Obviously, if our students will perform on these STAR tests, they're going to graduate. And we know that we've got to improve on our graduation rate. So that domain, though, stands alone from the other three in the sense that it is not based upon STAR directly.
I'm going to ask a question too. I see the first three domains are based on STAR test, as you just spoke. And then I think in the recording it said we need to base these on a history of maybe 5 years. I think that's what it said. Or a period that we have these goals, the same criteria every year. Have we had anything in effect that lasted that long before? I mean, do we expect the STAR to be here for 5 more years, or are they going to change again?
We've currently have not been able to equate 1 year to the next because of all the changes that have occurred just in relation to which kids are counted in STAR and which kids aren't. Math standards changed, so we couldn't do comparisons with math from year to year. So that will be very new if there's any stability and to be able to maintain that over the course of 5 years.
What the multi-year reference to the fact that in the past, the standards by which you were graded or whatever were constantly moving and changing. And so one of the two premises of this grading system is that it is their intention to keep the bar, if you will, set at the same level for a multi-year period going forward.
Yes.
Unlike they have done in the last 5 or more, 10 or more years.
Right. To directly answer, that's correct. They're going to try to do that. There is an advantage of being old, and the only time we really had a stable system was when Mike Moses was the Commissioner of Education. And he purposefully kept it rather stable for us, which was really good because we could measure from year to year our progress. But that was way back. And Elise is exactly right. The standards have changed. We've had phase-in cut scores all the way up and down, so it's been very, very difficult to track. You move, and then they change the cut score, and you fall back, and you move. So it's hard for parents to follow.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? I think we'll have another opportunity to discuss this in one of our action items. I think I'll reserve my comments for that section. Any other questions, Ms. Kale? All right, thank you very much. All right, item 5B, the instructional process, unpacking the standards. Ms. Neighbors, Ms. Evanstein.
What page is it on?
Oh, it's on page 102 of our board packet.
Good evening.
Thank you.
Kelly, let me just make a quick comment. You notice we've been doing this series with you, and we want you to truly understand what Mr. Fuller was really asking. Are we doing, taking action to address these kinds of results? And Patrick started, and then last month, not last week, we had a presentation that was more somewhat of an overview, and then this one is going to be a very key component of what we're trying to do in terms of question 1 on PLCs.
Okay. All right, like you just said, last month we began a series of presentations for you breaking down our MISD instructional process. There's one.
That's not on here. This is a separate one.
It's not on the right slide. There. Oh. Okay. There. Now we are. Okay. Jill and Diane talked about this slide last month, but we wanted to reemphasize why this process is so critical. The collaborative study that teachers engage in around essential standards ensures that teachers are on the same page with what a standard means, what does it actually look like when a student has mastered learning, what are they expected to know and be able to do, and what are the prerequisite skills that kids need to have to access the learning. This work cannot be done in isolation. It has to be done collaboratively, because when teachers work in isolation, they could come up with a very different interpretation of what a standard means, and if that happens, they're teaching it differently. Or they may have a different interpretation of what are the most critical standards, and so they're given different emphasis. So the collaborative work that teachers engage in around these essential standards means they're on the same page. That's the only way to guarantee a viable curriculum, is if every teacher has the same understanding of what a standard means. This increases teacher effectiveness, especially for those new teachers who come into the profession and they have no idea what all these standards mean, which ones are most important for kids to master, and that kind of thing. So this collaborative study is critical to our success. All of the work we're doing centers around these 4 critical questions. What do we expect our kids to learn? How will we know if they've learned it? How are we going to respond when they don't learn it or they haven't learned it? And then how are we going to respond to those kids that have already learned it? How are we going to enrich the learning for them? Question number 1 is actually broken into 2 parts. What do we want our kids to learn has 2 parts. And Jill and Diane talked to you about identifying the essential standards last month. The second piece to that is, after you've identified what the essential standards are, you have to break those standards apart, and that's what Lisa and I are going to talk to you about, how to unwrap or unpack a standard. It's a deep analysis of what the standard means so that all the teachers are on the same page. We do have a short video clip that we want to show you. In this clip, it explains sort of the why behind this work, and Dr. Sharon Kramer is a national presenter. She works with teachers across the nation. She's written several books, and currently she's one of the solution tree consultants that works with several of our campuses here. She works with Bonham, De Zavala, Lamar, Midland Freshman, Lehigh, and Midland High. Now, before we start the video, I do have a little bit of a disclaimer. Again, I think Jill told you this last month, but I'm going to tell you again. You will hear her refer to Common Core, because the group of teachers that she's presenting to are in a Common Core state. But remember, Common Core is just what those states call their set of standards. We have a different set of standards that we call the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or the TEKS. So when you hear her refer to Common Core, you need to think standards, because the process of breaking standards down is the same regardless of what the standard is.
So how will we understand them as teachers? Let's start with us first, because we will be better at teaching if we understand our targets. So we're going to unwrap the standards with your team. Now, I will tell you that Dr. Marzano unpacks, Doug Reeves and Larry Ainsworth unwrap. There's Rick Stiggins deconstructs. It doesn't matter what you do, just do it, okay? Because what you're trying to do is arrive at the meaning. Now, I choose with the Common Core to unwrap. And the reason I choose to unwrap and show this to you is because I think we're still trying to figure out what the Common Core means. And I think the unwrapping process gets us clearer about the meaning inside of the Common Core. So I choose for these purposes to unwrap. So really what you're doing, and you don't do this alone, because everything you see on the screen, Sharon Kramer did by herself. And when Sharon Kramer brainstorms with Sharon Kramer, it's not a very deep, rich conversation. Okay, so we could debate some of the things I put up here. The reality is your team, you need to build shared knowledge around this. You need to do this collectively. So with your team, you want to answer, what does this standard mean? Do we all have a shared understanding? What are the embedded learning targets along the way? That's what you're really getting clear on when you unwrap. What would this look like if a student could actually do it? And then the next really important question is this one. What is the level of rigor required by this standard? Now, we can talk about this a lot, but an analysis of assessments we've been given over time says that most of our assessments are at the recall level. Now, most of you went to school with Bloom. How many of you went to school in Benjamin Bloom? Okay, all right. We all did. It came out in 1955. I mean, most of us, some of you weren't even born yet. I get it. Okay, all right. So the reality of this is that recall is at the lowest level. It's like playing Trivial Pursuit. So the reality of this is a new next generation assessments that we're seeing come out now, the released items from PARC or Smarter Balance, whichever system you are, really don't have anything at the mere recall level. Every test item is at a depth of knowledge level of 2 or 3, and they're even trying to develop depth of knowledge questions at 4. Given that, we have to stop playing Trivial Pursuit and figure out what the rigor is. And it's simple as this. How many thinking levels does a student need to go through to get the answer? That's what we need to know. And that's really, really important. I worked with a turnaround high school in Oklahoma City for the last 3 years, and the English department was a really great collaborative team, and they were working really, really hard, and they did a benchmark assessment close to the end of the year. And they had worked on point of view, and they were so excited about how they had worked on point of view, and they intervened for it, and they had they looked at data, they had their ducks in a row, they thought everything was great. Benchmark assessments, and the kids scored the lowest on point of view. They were just dejected, and they said to me, Sharon, can you come to our team meeting today? We need to talk. And I got in there, and I said, let's look at the questions on the benchmark. And as soon as we started looking at the questions on the benchmark, here's what happened. They realized that they were asking at the recall level, and the kids were asked to do something with that information in a different way. And so there was a mismatch between what kids were really being asked to do and what we were teaching. So it really needs to happen. And then if you're clear about all these things, it really leads to a good assessment design. So when you're trying to determine how will I check for understanding or how will I formatively assess, this helps you with that process.
Okay, you've just viewed the why, and so now I'm going to talk to you about the how. And this is part of the information that was in your packet earlier. And so what we want the teachers to do is to look in the middle section. And so, for example, if I'm a 5th grade teacher, I'm going to write down into the middle section the 5th grade TEK. Then I'm going to also need to go back and look at what did they do in 4th grade, and then what they're going to be doing in 6th grade. So we need to look at what we call vertical alignment to make sure that we are teaching what we need to teach and kind of what we call staying in our lane. Teachers have a lot of resources to use, and one of the resources they use is the Lead Forward resources, such as the academic vocabulary. They also look at a field guide. They look at scaffolding documents, and so it's not just a one-stop shop. They look at several different things to make sure that they are teaching to the level of rigor that they need to, so that the students can be successful. The next part that you also have a copy of is it talks about the 6 steps that a teacher would go through. And what the main thing is here is that we do have a uniform approach to unpacking a standard. And so some of the templates may vary from campus to campus, but as far as the content that would be on the template would look the same. So if you happen to go visit a campus and they show you a different type of template than what you have, you'll just notice that the content would be the same. So when you go through and you look at a standard, this is an actual 5th grade math standard, and the standard here says to compare and order 2 decimals to the thousandths and represent comparisons using the symbols greater than, less than, or equal to. So when you start breaking down the standard or unwrapping or whatever you might want to call it, as you'll notice in the video, she said different people call it different things. But if you look at it here, the skills are the things that are circled. So our students must be able to compare, order, and represent. And if you'll look at the content, that's the nouns. So that's underlined the 2 decimals and the comparisons. And then if you'll look at the red, because I wasn't able to really double underline, so I just did it in red so you could tell, that's the context. Once that we find out what the skill and the content is, are we going to see it in context. And then finally, as she mentioned before, we have to know the rigor, because it's not just that trivial pursuit. It's not just that one-word answer. It is a process that our students have to actually explain when they are going through an item. If you'll look here, these are the things, you know, she referred to Bloom, Benjamin Bloom, and that was what I went to school with a long time ago. But a lot of things have come up as far as we have, and actually Bloom has revised his version as well. But we also have the depth of knowledge, which is from Webb. So different schools will use different things. Everyone still feels a little bit more comfortable with Bloom. It's talking about when you go through and you remember, you understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, and create. But depth of knowledge has really come on in the last few years. We've seen lots more with that, and that is based on a 4-level standard, which is recall and reproduction, basic skills and concepts, strategic thinking and reasoning, and extended thinking. When you go through and you look at these, I wanted to kind of show you, this is kind of a format that the teachers would look at to try to break down a standard to know exactly what they need to teach from that standard. So what we've done is we've taken all of the verbs, the nouns, the context, and then we've looked at that to see what level of rigor that must be taught at. So if you'll notice, the 5.2b is up at the top there, and we just put that in categories. Most of the STAR questions are level 2 and level 3. So when you go through that whole process, you come out with what we call 3 learning targets. And if you'll notice that all of these words are going to be in the standard, but what we've done is really kind of simplified the standard to make sure that we are teaching the complete standard. So for example, from the standard 5.2b, which is the 5th grade math standard, we would compare decimals to the thousandth place, order decimals to the thousandth place, and represent comparisons of decimals using greater than, less than, or equal to. And so that's what a learning target would be. And that is really, you'll take that learning target, and that's what you will actually develop your lesson plan around, those learning targets. So these are some of the things that are in a lesson plan, and so they would take the lesson target and develop the lesson plan around that. The most important thing here is that we have collaboratively talked about this, because we need to make sure that we are all teaching the same, for example, the same type of academic vocabulary. I might think this is important, my teammate might think that's important, and we need to decide as a team what is important to teach. So that's kind of the conclusion of our question 1. In February, we're going to move on to question 2 of the 4 critical questions. Do you have any questions for us?
Make sure I understand. If I understand the PLC concept, the state determines the essential skills that we are to teach our students through the TEKS. That's right. And this district has mandated that we utilize the PLC process by which to teach those TEKS. However, the beauty of the PLC is that we allow the teachers at the grade level to collaborate among themselves to determine how best to teach that, learn from each other, formative assessments, and determine themselves how they teach that in the classroom. Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're continuing with our board campus reports. We haven't had much of a January to make your campus your January visits, but for those that have, you get an A. Anybody like to volunteer?
Sure, I'll go first.
I'll go second.
Okay, you go first.
No, you go first.
I actually did my January visit in December because I knew I wasn't going to have time in January. I went to Burnett. The principal there is Ms. Amalia, I guess is the pronunciation. She's been there as a principal about 3 years. They have 50 on staff, of which 33 are teachers and 2 are special teachers. Total number of students about 550. 80% of them are on free and reduced lunch. They are in meet standards right now. They are not they are non-IR. They don't have any distinctions, but it's really an exciting campus, and in an area where like 80% free and reduced lunch. So obviously not in necessarily the best part of town, but the campus itself is bustling. People are excited. All the students are excited, and there's examples of the PLCs working all across the campus, in that the teachers work together and have things up in the teacher lounges about how they're going to accomplish everything, and it's really working. They have great teacher collaboration. They have a curriculum coordinator, and they have a very strong team, and they're really excited. They were in IR. They've come out, and they want to stay out. And it's a really exciting campus. If I had children, I wouldn't mind at all if they were there. It's a good place. Anybody have any questions about that?
Thank you, John. James?
I visited lead freshman. Mr. Stoltz is the principal. He's been in the business 31 years. He has been at lead freshman 8 years. There are 50 teachers there, 2 assistant principals, 2 counselors, 4 clerical persons, a nurse, and instructional specialists. He indicated that the number of students ranges anywhere from 760 to 770, and he pointed out today that they have just recently enrolled 3 students. So the point he's making is we've got kids coming into the district. 42% of the students on free and reduced lunch, which would pan out to be about 300. But he indicated that, and this is a similarity between this school and Coleman, that the older the kids are, they are not anxious to become a part of the free and reduced lunch program because of the stigma that is attached to it in many instances. Their academic status is academically acceptable, and Mr. Stoltz pointed out that they are not satisfied with that they are going to continue to work vigorously to move higher. I asked him what were some of the strengths on his campus academically, and he pointed out that Algebra 1 and Biology 1 are strong courses with strong student participation or performance. His challenge in the area of academics is in the area of English 1. He points out that he's had difficulty finding a permanent person to teach in that particular area. The securing of long-term subs has posed a challenge relative to ELA. He was very enthusiastic about what is taking place relative to the PLC program. The majority of his staff, he indicates, embraces it, and there are a number of programs that he held up for elaboration. One, Lead 4, the ESL program, Abbott, and he pointed out that there's been a significant progress made in the area of the special ed program. His most significant challenge, according to him, on his campus has to do with students being able to read and understand the questions on the test that they are expected to pass. I asked him, well, if that's the case, to what do you attribute, in your opinion, the lack of ability to read? And his response made sense in that he underscored the fact that we as a district might need to address more vigorously the matter of consistency in instruction relative to reading. He points out that the PLC is a strong proponent of what they are doing over there. Most, as he pointed out, are in support of it. They're working vigorously to make a difference in this regard. Their partner in education is AT&T, and he underscored the fact that they supply resources which in turn is put to use by holding 4 parent conferences or meetings during the course of the year, one of those being High School 101. Of the 4, the most attendees have been at High School 101. And there will be another program of this nature coming up in February. I asked him what was his reaction to the A through F accountability system. I appreciated his response because it was honest and to the point. Teachers view the accountability system as a negative. They feel like they're being beat down. The legislature, and both of us agreed on this, I didn't influence him either. The legislature has a narrow view of what the learning process constitutes. And as Rod pointed out earlier in our little conversation, the legislature sees a student, not a student of multiple talent, multiple characteristics, unfortunately. I asked him, what about the parents who have kids that leave freshmen? How many have come forward and inquired about this accountability system? Not many, a few, he underscored. The morale at lead freshmen, I'm quoting him now, it's been a tough year. Teachers feel beat down, quote unquote. Then I finally got into a conversation with him about the immediate reaction of the reaction of the immediate community to what's taking place at Lee Freshman. He says that there's a significant rapport between the community and the school. Matter of fact, neighbors look out for kids, and when they see things of question or student conduct, they immediately communicate those things to the principal, and as a result, they are able to forcibly nip some of these, what would otherwise be discipline issues, in the bud. As I sat there and talked with him, and the report earlier reminded me of this accountability system represents, in my opinion, shades of Dr. William Shockley, a bell-shaped curve advocate. And Mr. Stoltz, tends to agree and points out that the majority of the kids given this A through F assessment are being shortchanged. But overall, he points out that we will, and I'm quoting him again, we will continue to work as a team to make sure that our students are getting a quality education. End of quote. It was a good visit.
Thank you. Any other reports this evening?
I've got one, I don't know.
Go ahead, Robert.
I went to Midland High, visit with Principal Grammy. He's been in his position 2.5 years. Number of staff is 175. Number of students was 2226. Number of free and reduced lunch percentage is 28. And he also agrees that number should be a lot higher. You know, once again, the stigma of kids not applying for this, you know, it's a stigma that they don't want to be associated with, but that number should be a lot higher. So, you know, we're forcing kids to spend that extra dollar that they don't have, and when somehow or another that communication-wise, we're not getting them to stay there to take advantage of that, and help strengthen the educational process instead of them worried about eating. So the school is a Met Standard school. We talked about at length about how Wi-Fi has enhanced the ability to provide a better instruction. So that communication has provided his staff with just more ability to do more, and so they were pretty excited to have received that the last couple of years, I think, and. So we talked about PLC collaboration with teachers, and he says that that's obviously an ongoing process, and he thinks it's going well. He was enthusiastic about it. He thinks that it, you know, obviously like anything else, it will take some time to get that foundation process in there, and and one of the things I shared with him. That obviously when you're changing programs constantly, you know, and no excuse at all, but I told him, hey, look, I understand the fact that as a community we change things, you know, and you know, one year we agree on one thing and then the next year we agree on something else, and I said we feel that this is, you know, going forward is the way to go, but I understand that it complicates things for you and your staff, and I said, but you know, it is what it is, and we got to move forward through it. So we talked about technology and how he feels that it still needs to, the overall consensus the school is behind in technology for the kids, so and the staff. So we didn't get in, you know, in the weeds about specific programs or media or capacity or nothing that network, but he sees overall that there should be more emphasis in technology. So you know, the other thing we talked about, which we went over the school report from TEA in depth, and so the way that the school is being partitioned out, I guess, is that's the correct word. Midland High and Midland freshmen are actually are being separated because of location. So those scores aren't combined, and it's kind of causing an issue with the way that some of the numbers are coming out. And I think they said that's conversation in progress and being looked at, which I thought that was kind of weird that they're not being considered the same, you know, a high school. So, and so once again, TEA sets up something and we have to muddle, you know, the district has to muddle through it. So it's one of those things that goes back to my mind. I know Rod probably doesn't want me to say it, but being in an independent school district, sometimes I wish that we removed that word, because, you know, that's not being independent sometimes. If you can't simply tell TA, hey, look, this school is the same school, you need to combine all the scores and it'd be a done deal. But obviously the process ain't that easy, so. But anyway, that's the challenges of trying to advocate for our schools and relaying that information to the public and also to the students, because the students see certain grade scores or percentages and they're thinking, wow, we're not doing quite well, you know, because they're automatically comparing themselves to some high school in Abilene or wherever the high school is at. And so now there's a unbalance in actual the way it's being looked at. And and it'd be a long conversation to get everybody cleared up on the fact that you're looking at one number here versus another number in Dallas. You know, don't want to use the word unfair, but, you know, it might be a little unjust. So, we talked a little bit about the facilities, because I had already taken up a lot of his time. And, so I knew that was going to be a long, long conversation, but I don't think it needs to be said that, Midland High needs facilities. So, but we started having a short conversation about it, but we spent the majority of time talking about some of these technical issues on the grading part from the report for the TEA for that particular school. And that's all I have.
Okay, I actually had the opportunity to visit Great House Elementary, which was great because it's where my three boys went, and so it was good to get back to Great House and see what was going on there. The principal there is Brandy Copeland. She's been there. This is her first year. I think she previously had been at Abell Middle School. She's very energetic, very excited about her campus. She said her teachers really look for stability. I think they've had a kind of a rollover of principals there for about three years in a row, and so that was the first thing that she convinced her teachers, I'm going to be here for a while, so let's get this together. She has about 60 people on staff, including the support team. She has roughly 729 students, of which 32% were on free and reduced lunches. They are a non-IR campus and with no distinctions. While I was there, I had the opportunity to visit in a couple of classrooms, and one that I asked to go to was Miss Weaver. She was two of my boys' third grade teachers, and she always had outstanding Thanksgiving programs, and one of the things I really want to get by and visit with her, she is retiring this year, so I want to wish her well. It's something she deserves. She's been a great teacher for MISD. The thing we talked about with Ms. Copeland was, you know, some of the things they're working with their sixth graders, and trying to get those guys to be the leaders on their campus, going through a day starter crew, safety patrol, ambassadors, encouragement crew, library crew. And so she's really excited, working hard with us, and she's going to be starting a student council next year for her sixth graders. So she's, you know, trying to grow them up and get them ready for the middle school process. I think the one thing that she wanted to share, and She took me specifically to a kindergarten class because one of her kindergarten teachers was ready and waiting on me. They have about 25 kids in most of their classes there, and she wanted to let me know. And one of the things I was able to see was the technology we have in the campuses at the elementary level is the devices they have on their person that they can look at a chalkboard and still talk, and kids behind them can hear, and so that was great. I also found it really exciting that while I was visiting with one of the kindergarten teachers, she had eyes out of the side of her head, and she called one of them down and said, "Let's make a better choice." And so I thought that was great. But I did visit with 2 kindergarten classes. They are busting at the seam, and so that seems to be their challenge right now. I think as of today, I did receive an email they had added 5 new kindergartners today. And so I think that had put them at max levels. I did have a very good visit with Miss Copeland, and the one thing when I left, I walked out, and I was walking down the hall, and I realized I still had my badge on, so I turned around to step back in the office and set my badge down. And she did this like cheerleading jump, like she was so excited. And I don't know if that meant she was glad I was leaving or if it went well, but I was excited. So anyway, that was Great House Elementary. Thank you very much. They are going to be so excited.
Other reports? All right, I'm going to exercise executive privilege. I have reports to give, but I'm going to wait till next month and move on and move it along. But thank you for all those reports. Those are very helpful. All right, now next item 5D and E, I'm going to combine list of bills and financial. The bills begin on page 105, the financials on page 136. Any discussion or questions about either of those 2 items? Hearing none, moving to the consent agenda, items 6A and B. A being minutes of our regular board meeting December 12th, and B being budget amendments and transfers. The minutes being on page 143 of our packet, and the budget amendment and transfers appearing on page 146 of our packet. Do either of those consent agenda items need to be pulled for any reason, for discussion, comments, or any other reason? Hearing none, they'll both be approved, deemed approved by consent. Now moving to our action item, 7A, discussion and possible approval of FDB local. Ms. Moore? That begins on page 147 of our packet.
Good evening, board members. For those of you I haven't gotten to meet who are new to the board, my name is Teresa Moore, and I'm the Executive Director of Student Services. And one of my responsibilities with the district is helping families get to the right school. So, with that having been said, our current transfer policy has been in place for quite a few years. And so you will notice in your packet that we have provided you with that policy and some proposed revisions that we're asking for your consideration on. If you'll look at page 1 of that policy and look in the very first paragraph, that's probably going to be one of the biggest changes, in that we're asking that the policy include a deadline to make a request for transfer. And by transfer, I mean you're assigned to school A, but your parents... That's
page 147 of
I'm sorry.
Board packet.
Okay,
Page 1 is page 147 of our packet.
Okay, thank you. For example, if you're assigned to school A, but for whatever reason your family feels like you would do better at school B, we're requesting that we set a deadline for that, because currently we've got parents asking for transfers for all kinds of reasons just all throughout the year. So, at Great House, there 25 kids in kindergarten classes. Well, we've added another teacher. That's kind of a moving target when parents are able to shift around through the transfer process as much as they are. So our hope is that establishing a specific deadline will eliminate some of that. With our PEG transfers, PEG, Public Education Grant transfers, we instituted a deadline a couple of years ago. And that's really helped that process. You've got a date where you can request that transfer, and then we don't give consideration for the most part to any of those turned in after that. So it helps us really kind of shore up that process. So that's really one of the major changes that we're requesting, and that's included in the very first paragraph.
And is
of
it
the
correct to
policy.
say that one of the primary reasons for that spring, and the deadline would be in the spring,
Yes, sir.
is to allow for proper planning
Yes,
and
sir.
staffing of the campuses to meet the needs of the students' populations that we established, for the most part, on the basis of that spring deadline?
Absolutely. That will give us an opportunity to do our projections for our enrollment for the following year. It'll give us an opportunity to study the housing trends and where's new construction and where's the population shifting. And then it will also give us an opportunity to establish how many teachers we need at each campus to accommodate the students who are assigned to that campus. And so we'll have that data, and then we're looking at a deadline of about mid-April, and then we'll take the rest of April, May, June, and July to make those decisions on those transfers and let families know within the first about 15 days before school starts.
In contrast to the existing policy that for non-PEG transfers, it was anytime anyone wanted to apply and have their application process, and they had the expectation, because the policy was different, that it ought to be ruled upon then at any point in time in the school year.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I had quite a few families today making that exact request, and so it's kind of a moving target. And if we establish that deadline, it really kind of shores up that process and keeps it from being so boundaryless, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So that is one of the major changes to the beginning of that policy. On the next page of that same policy, we've clarified or simplified or streamlined the language in the existing reasons that a parent can make a request for transfer. We've kind of broadened it in some areas and then eliminated some current provisions that are in there as well. One of the changes that I think is important to note is that our current policy says that a district employment of the parent, but it limits that to can take their child to the school where they work. Well, that's great if you work at the school that's the same grade level as your child, but we all know that doesn't stay that way forever, and we have a lot of employees who aren't designated to a campus. So this really works out well for a lot of our employees. For example, we've got secondary teachers, let's say at Alamo, who just need their child to be at Bonham because of proximity, and so it would expand the options that our employees have relative to placement of their children. So that's one of the major provisions in here. We're also requesting that the elimination of the second provision be the second provision be considered the child care provision. That makes our projecting how many kids are going to be at each school every year extremely difficult because of the large number of students who make that request. We've also added a little bit to the reasons that a transfer can be revoked or denied, and we've placed an emphasis on an increased enrollment so that parents understand that it is in policy that if a grade level or a campus or a classroom becomes over-enrolled or close to capacity, that we won't grant any more transfers, and that we can't even remove transfers in the event that we have an over-enrolled classroom. And then finally, we've taken a paragraph that's on the very front of the policy and put it at the very end that basically just says the superintendent or designee may initiate an administrative transfer at any time, because we know that there will be things that will arise during the course of a school year that will warrant consideration of a transfer outside that deadline. So those are the revisions that are for your consideration at this time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have for me. Or try to.
Do we have I'm trying to think of the question because of the portables. So when we have portables at a school, does that not automatically already set it? And I mean, are we showing that school that we're overpopulated by the portables?
It's possible. Sometimes we may need to only add one classroom for one grade level. And so Mr. Riggins always provides us with the total capacity for the building. So if we're still within that capacity limit, we still may need to add a portable for lots of different reasons, but that doesn't automatically mean that the school is over-enrolled in its entirety. However, that's a very good indication that we don't need to add any more students to that campus.
Right, so do we have that? I mean, is that a judgment call by you, Rod? Because what I'm saying is that obviously if you got a school that's got 6 portables and you're not considering it full or over full, over capacity.
Well, the question, first of all, I don't know if I had to make any judgment on this, but I've got a number of comments. But the first one is, I consider those portables as part of the school, and that's part of the capacity. And so if there is a seat in that portable that's available for a student transfer, well, then that seat's available. Assuming that there's some capacity to handle parents who might move in during the year and want to go to that neighborhood school. You always have to protect some of those seats for move-ins. Some campuses are very mobile, some campuses are very stable. And so the principal is best to know about how many seats should be protected based upon the mobility of that community. Now I'm coming from the perspective of my former district, okay? But that's the way I look at that. I will tell you the second thing is with regards to portables. I think it would be helpful, and you may not be able to do it, but I think it'd be helpful if the board established that we're only going to have X number of portables at each campus.
Right.
We're not going to go above that number, or we're going to have to build a new school.
Right.
And I know that was one of the things that we did that helped us drive and tell us when we needed to add campuses, because we wanted our kids in permanent facilities as much as possible. Now that's a board decision or a policy decision that you would make. I don't know that there's any, I have not found anything like that here. Basically, it's because of what Teresa said, the mobility and the way this policy has worked, parents have really just been able to move anytime, and that's created this need for moving portables and establishing larger capacities with portables at some of these campuses.
Right, and that's part of the, so that's part of the question there, that some of the people that, as we're changing this, that people don't realize that we have capacity at these schools, but it's not really part of the school. It's just another building that's been slightly added that's not actually to the same possible standard as the school that exists right next to it. So, and obviously we don't have a policy in place for the capacity. So you don't have a guidance on capacity for each school as far as to where we're going to not let kids go to or come to, or?
We're hoping to cap consideration of transfers when the school is considered about 90%. So somewhere between 90 and 95%. If the enrollment is within that amount, we would most likely not continue to grant transfers to that school. Because as Rod said, we need to preserve, particularly in our kindergarten through 4th grade with the 22-1, we need to preserve those spaces for students who actually reside within that campus's attendance area. Once you get to the junior highs and the 9th grades and the senior highs, it's a little fuzzier, if you will, because there's not a 22-to-1. However, as I said, Mr. Riggins provides us with the building capacity. So we look at each campus's enrollment compared to the others. So our 4 junior highs are really good examples. If you've got one junior high that's projected to be at 1,200 students, when the building capacity is 850, 900, well, obviously you would not want to grant additional transfers to that school because it simply, facility-wise, can't handle it. You know, you have to look at how many kids have to go through the cafeteria and have to go through the gymnasiums and the restroom capacity and those types of things. So the consideration would be that once a school reaches a certain capacity, no new transfers, no additional transfers would be granted into that to preserve that neighborhood population's ability to attend that school.
Right, because at South Elementary, my last visit, we had a discussion about the swinging students, and I think they had, if I remember correctly, I think she had 700 students the previous year. And so I was thinking about the fact that portables shouldn't be considered part of the school for capacity. That should be an overcapacity number and should be realized that for any school that we have a portable at, because that information, the public needs to know that we have overcapacitized that school. So that school is being, it's like taking a half-ton pickup and putting a 1 ton worth of material in it. Now the stress of the school is obviously exists from teaching to flow in the school, heating, cooling, food services. I mean, that's not, we shouldn't be looking at that way. That we should have a list and identify that these schools are over capacity by this current number of students if we're using the portables. You know, and I don't know if they can fit somewhere else or but in this transfer deal, that should be something that should be considered in the capacity of the school.
And we do. While that, and what we hope to accomplish by changing the transfer policy is to not allow transfers to contribute to any over-enrollment of any particular campus. We don't want, we recognize that there may be campuses across town that have more students enrolled than perhaps the building proper was designed to hold, and we don't want the transfer process to add to that burden.
Right. So what I'm saying is that, like South, just making it for an example, but we should be saying that South should have, I don't know the current number, but the number, I didn't ask the question the other day, but the number should be at, 580. And if she had 700, that means that there's 120 kids over capacity at that school that we should be looking to either help move or situate somewhere else that there's capacity at, if the parent chooses to, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Is it also true about the portable issue, though? Is it also true, I think you alluded to it earlier, that just because a portable exists on a campus doesn't mean it's overcrowded at each grade level?
Correct.
It may just be one particular grade level. Certainly what Mr. Marquez says would be true if it was, you had a portable for each and every class, but if the fact that you can eyeball a portable on a campus doesn't mean that it's overcrowded and overcapacity at each grade, correct? Okay.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Because we may have, but let's just say a grade level that's within the 22-to-1 requirement. So we might have third grade, there might be 3 teachers, and so that would be 66 kids. Well, we might have 76 kids. So we would need to add another classroom. And so if all of the available space was already taken up, then that would be a time when we would add a portable. But But again, I absolutely understand what you're saying, that it certainly does appear that if you've got to add additional classrooms outside the building proper, that could be construed as over-enrollment in many cases.
Yeah, and whether it's kindergarten, second grade, or first grade, or fifth grade, the fact of the matter is that if the student doesn't fit in the classroom, then, and it has to be put in a portable, to me, that's overcapacity. Because when we built the school, it went to the voters and said, we're going to build a school to teach this many kids and this many faculty in it. That was the size of the school. So to me, in my view, is any person that's out in the portable is overcapacity.
And that is true in many cases, but not 100%. Sometimes we'll have specialized classrooms within the building, and so we need another classroom for a regular, I mean, there's just a lot of reasons,
Right.
but I certainly understand your point.
When Travis was built, there was a teacher that was put in the closet. So that was, to me, overcapacity. So if we're going to have instruction, for whatever instruction we're going to have, we should be looking forward and providing another room in the school to whatever educational other process that's going on. We shouldn't be looking at putting a portable outside to meet that need. So that's something that, as we go forward, obviously any facility that's built should have a room for reading or math or whatever the case is. They shouldn't be going outside to the portable to meet that need.
Mr. President, can we move forward? I think we're
Any other
kind
questions?
of off the subject.
Any questions or comments about this action item before I entertain a motion? All right, this is an action item.
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Fuller.
Second.
Second by Mr. Murray. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Ms.
Thank
Moore.
you.
Action item 7B, discussion and possible approval of resolution opposing A to F school district ratings.
At your request, we prepared the resolution using the Texas Association of School Administrators resolution as sort of a base document, but there are some customized whereases in this document, and I think you've seen it. So it's put in front of you for your consideration.
I move approval.
Motion by Ms. Nicholson, second by Mr. Fuller.
And I'd like to read all the whereases, since, as you said, some of them are specific to MISD. Whereas the Board of Trustees recognizes that the Texas Legislature will convene in January 10, 2017 and can address deficiencies in the A through F system. And whereas the Board of Trustees has been aware of and monitored the academic performance of the district in comparison to the state and Region 18 academic performance for a number of years. And whereas we embrace meaningful accountability that informs students, parents, and teachers about the learning needs of each student in each school. And whereas the Texas Legislature has enacted legislation that requires the Commissioner of Education to implement a public school rating system that would assign A through F grades to schools and districts beginning with the 2017-18 school year. And whereas at least 16 states have implemented a similar rating system utilizing A through F grades for schools and districts, and to date, there is no definitive research that suggests those ratings have improved student or school performance. And whereas in a recent statewide survey conducted by the State Board of Education, an overwhelming majority of Texans do not want high-stakes standardized test scores to serve as the primary basis for a public school rating. And whereas the majority, 55%, of the A through F grades are based on the State of Texas Assessment of Academic Readiness, STAR, a high-stakes standardized test that does not accurately measure student learning. And whereas the Commissioner's proposed rating rating system utilizing A through F grades for schools and districts includes 5 domains and numerous unrelated indicators to determine a single grade, leaving the public with an invalid, disconnected reflection of school quality. And whereas the Commissioner's proposed rating system utilizing A through F grades for schools and districts creates a false impression about students, ignores the unique strengths of each school, and unfairly reduces each student's worth to the school's assigned grade. And whereas we believe our state's future prosperity relies on a high-quality education system that prepares students for college and careers, and without such a system, Texas' economic competitiveness and ability to attract new business will falter, now therefore be it resolved that the Midland Independent School District Board of Trustees calls on the Texas Legislature to refine the system to eliminate an overall grade of A through F for each district or campus, and consider empowering school districts to design their own internal systems of accountability that, while meeting the general state standards, allow school districts to innovate and customize curriculum, instruction, and assessment to meet the needs and interests of each student and their communities. And be it further resolved that this new system should reduce the use of high-stakes standardized tests, encompass multiple assessments, reflect greater validity, and more accurately reflect what students know and can do in terms of the rigorous standards. As I said last month, this is purely political and symbolic. We aren't saying that we want no accountability, but we are saying that this new system has flaws, and Texas needs a meaningful accountability system. However, our passing this resolution is not enough to get anything done. It takes parents and other people that are interested in education also to say Texas needs a meaningful accountability system. And that involves not just talking to Representative Craddock and Senator Seliger, but our governor, our lieutenant governor, our Speaker of the House, and probably even the education committees in both the House and the Senate, especially the committee chairs of those committees. Education is complex. What we do locally to improve education is something we've acknowledged and repeatedly taken responsibility for, and it's different than improving the entire Texas system. Yes, the two are intertwined, but they are different. This is not a defensive maneuver. Even with the flaws of a Texas system, we know there is much work to be done to improve MISD outcomes. So this resolution basically says we want both our MISD efforts and school districts around the state's efforts to be judged by a better, more meaningful standard. Thank you for my little soapbox speech.
And it begs the question, how long will we continue to allow our students to be political pawns?
Other comments? The comments that I reserved from earlier is that I am certain that accountability is a good thing and that we need it for each and every school district. I am not certain that that accountability standard needs to be authored by the state and a one-size-fit-all type criteria be applied to every district. I do think that every local school district needs to be held accountable, and we certainly have sufficient data to hold us accountable without having a letter grade that the commissioner admonishes us not to consider this letter grade to be any inference of school district performance. We don't yet know how the letter grade has been established fully. We don't know yet what the letter grade is, how it's going to be determined going forward. Those are among the many flaws that this system has. But make no mistake, this is a resolution, in my opinion, designed to communicate to the legislature who are receiving feedback about the many flaws of this system. We want to join in the chorus of those people criticizing the flaws in this system, and in hopes that perhaps they would reconsider that this is a system they want to use going forward. But please don't make any mistake about the district or public that we realize we have work to do. We have sufficient objective data to review that we are looking at, and we are working hard to improve without the problems that this unnecessarily causes us in our efforts to do just that and transform this district, which we are committed to doing. So I'm in favor of this resolution for those reasons.
I'd like to say something too. The fact that we're talking about each individual school district coming up with their own measurements makes us more accountable and not less accountable.
Any other comments before we vote? All right, all those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, action item 7C, discussion and possible approval of RFP 06026, Campus Instructional Support Services. That information begins on page 151 of our board packet. And are there any questions about this? I think the point system and the recommendation is that it go to Target Teaching out of Lubbock, Texas.
That is correct. Sorry, that is correct.
And there were 3 applicants that made a bid, none of which were local, although the recommended one is the closest in Lubbock, Texas.
That is correct.
All right. Any questions for Ms. Mould?
Ms. Mould, will you just briefly tell us what we're voting on like we talked about this afternoon?
Yes. We were asked to go out for a request for proposals for, it's campus instructional support services, but it's for more of a detailed instructional professional development. So what they would do is they would come in, they would sit down with the teachers in their PLCs, they would give them more information, more training on how to go through the TEKS, unpacking the TEKS, and then they would actually take that instruction into the classroom and show the teacher how to do that. This is a supplemental service. It will be funded by federal funds, and these vendors are EGR compliant. So it's not going to be an additional budget cost. It's just to give more in-depth support services to those teachers at those campuses that are IR.
Nor does it contradict anything that we are doing.
That is correct. It's all totally aligned.
And
Repeat
also,
that,
I'm
Patrick. What did you say? I didn't hear it all.
This specialized training does not conflict with any of the initiatives that we've introduced to our campuses. It's in alignment with our best practices and professional development that's on the board.
Thank you.
and it's my understanding also that this is campus-driven, so a principal will make the request to have this on their campus, so it's not something we're feeding them, it's something they're asking for, and we're providing them another resource.
That is correct. It's just supplemental as provided to the campus.
Thank you.
Any other questions? This is an action item.
I move.
Motion by Mr. Murray, second by Mr. Kennedy. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Action item 7D, discussion and possible approval of personnel appointments as more specifically described on page 153 of our board packet. Mr. Zachary is available for questions if we have any for him. Any questions? Go ahead.
Yes, what is our shortages if we have any right now, Mr. Zachary?
For all practical purposes, we're pretty well filled, with the exception of the fact that we've had a number of people to resign effective at the end of the semester. Some have notified us that they are going to be resigning. Spouses have been transferred, that sort of thing, during the month of January. So, but for the most part, we're functioning at a relatively full level in the school district. Some of our principals have employed full-time, long-term subs who have worked out very well for them, and they have asked to be able to retain those. So we have worked very closely with the principals and have, I think, had some graduates to come out at midterm who have been made available to us. And so Mr. Bailey and I were discussing that this afternoon, and all things considered, we're probably in the best position we've been in this year.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Zachary? Is it an action item?
Make a motion,
Motion by Mr. Bishop, second by Mr. Marquez. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous, thank you. All right, and still a need for executive session on the item. Okay. All right, it is now 7:10 p.m. and we will go into executive session. Consultation with attorney regarding real estate issues and personnel issues pursuant to sections 551.071, 551.072, and 551.074 of the Texas Government Code. We will emerge from that and address at least one, if not both, of the action items from that. I guess. And we won't be very long if you want to stay for those action items. Otherwise, I assume they're excused if they don't have any further business? Yes. Mr. Schroeder, thank you. All right, it is 7:21 p.m. We are emerging from executive session, and we will take up agenda item 9A, discussion and possible approval of a settlement agreement with Dynastudy. Motion by Mr. Bishop to approve the settlement agreement with Dynastudy.
Second.
Second by Mr. Marquez. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. It's unanimous. Thank you. Action item 9B, discussion and possible approval of 25-foot pipeline easement in favor of Midland Petro DC Partners, LLC, on north 30 feet of property in Section 42, Block 38, Township 1 South, Midland. Is there a motion this evening?
A motion to table it till next week, next month.
All right, we'll go that route. All right, is there a second to the motion to table? Second by Mr. Bishop. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion to table passes till next month. It is now 7:22 p.m. and we are adjourned. Thank you very much.